Hey folks, welcome back. So this is the second video that I'm making to explain all the different classes. And I decided the second class that I want to make a video about is the oldest class, and also a popular one, Sorcerers. So I don't know if you can tell, but I'm in front of this mural for my background for this video, and the reason I picked it is because I think sorcerers, and oftentimes the people that play them, are usually pretty creative. So something that I forgot to mention in the last video that I'll try to remember to mention in all the other videos is part of getting a class, of getting any class. The very first requirement is you have to have a collective stat of 32. That means you have to look at all of your stats, add them together, and if they equal the number 32, you are now eligible for a class. That's true of sorcerers, that's true of any class. I want to take a moment to talk about magic in the adventure survival world. So, just to clarify, there's no class known as wizard. In adventure survival, pretty much anyone can learn and teach spells, and those people would be considered wizards. There's no special class. So what's a sorcerer? A sorcerer is someone who does magic, but in some way, something happened to them. Whether it was something that they were sort of exposed to, or just kind of how they were born, they have a little extra magic. Not only do they cast and teach spells, but they can also create spells as well. Okay, so requirements to become a sorcerer, to have the sorcerer class. I already mentioned you have to have a collective stat of 32. Besides that, though, you gotta have a backstory, and I think that sorcerers are definitely a class where backstory is pretty important. In the sorcerer's backstory, you need to explain to me how they got these powers. Maybe they drank from a magical well when they were little. Maybe their parents made a deal with a magical fae being, and it was a trick, and this magic was kind of put onto them when they were young. Or maybe something else happened. Maybe they're exposed to some sort of magical slime from a giant slug. There are a lot of different possibilities, but the important part is that in some way this character sort of had powers thrust upon them. They were exposed to something, something happened to them, and now they're magical whether they want to be or not. If you're not entirely sure and you're looking for ideas for your sorcerer's origins, for your sorcerer's magical power, I would look at a lot of superheroes. A lot of comic book heroes kind of fit that structure, in that, maybe they were bitten by a radioactive spider, maybe they were born with the X gene, maybe they had some sort of super serum injected into them. The big takeaway is that they went from being sort of ordinary to, at some point, these powers coming into their life and affecting them in a pretty big way. Another thing to become a sorcerer is you have to tell me your favorite type of magic. What does that mean? Well, sorcerers' magic is fueled by their emotions. One of their main casting abilities is their charisma. The way I always imagine sorcerers is that at some point their powers went from dormant, like inactive, to active. That's usually going to be during a time of high stress, of high emotion. So for instance, maybe your character was born with these powers, but nothing really happened. Maybe a few strange things happened here or there, but for the most part they didn't realize that they had magic. But then suddenly maybe a friend or a parent or themselves were in danger, and in that moment the magic burst forth, and from then on they were able to kind of access it and use it to the great advantage. The point is, to call forth that magic again, they need to get those emotions going again. So for example, an NPC that I've introduced a couple of times is a character called Evil Fur, and he's a sorcerer, and he doesn't like to see people get hurt. It makes him feel really sad. And so what happened was he was, exposed to this ritual even before he was born, but the powers lay dormant. But one day he saw a bunch of people getting hurt, and that's when his powers came forth. So his power, his magic specialty, is healing magic, because he feels really strongly. He has really strong emotions that come forward when someone gets hurt. So you have to tell me your favorite type of magic. And just to clarify, your source of magic and your favorite kind of magic don't necessarily need to be connected. They can be. So for example, two things I can think of. So let's say you have a character named Freckles the gerbil. Freckles the hamster. And Freckles, maybe went along one day and found this weird berry and ate it, and it was like a magical berry, and maybe some strange things started happening, but nothing too big. All of a sudden, one day, he lives in he lives in a garbage pile outside of town. Some big monster came by, started wrecking up his garbage pile, and his magic manifested, and he was able to teleport away and get to safety. His favorite type of magic might be trash magic, because he misses his home, and when he thinks about his home, he thinks about, losing it, and it helps him fuel his powers and helps him maybe use that to protect folks and help other folks so they don't lose their homes. So maybe all the spells he creates are in some way garbage based, like instead of creating a tent to sleep in at night, he creates a big half-crushed soda can that he likes to cozy up in. That doesn't mean he can't cast spells that aren't of his favorite type of magic, but it means when he's creating a spell, that's something he's leaning towards. Another example I can think of is when the origin of magic and their favorite type of magic are connected. So, for instance, maybe Springy the Unicorn was minding his own business, was traveling through the woods, when all of a sudden a strange magical spider sort of lunged forward and bit him, and he thought he was done for. But it did not destroy him. Instead, it somehow bestowed magical powers upon him, and like the power of the spider started flowing through him. So his spells, when he creates them, are always kind of connected to spiders or insects. Sorry, arachnids. Technically, spiders aren't insects. But, perhaps he likes to create spells that are based around, shoot a string of webbing at someone and stick them in place, or stick to wall. Like he creates a spell called Wall Stick, where he can climb up, walk up a wall like a spider. In that case, his source of power and his favorite magic are connected, so it can go both ways. Alright, once you have your backstory created, then let's start looking at some of the special abilities of the Sorcerer. So like I said, almost anyone can learn and teach spells. However, sorcerers can make spells. So you can make one low-level spell a day in-game. You can create one spell a day in-game, which is something that I don't think we've talked about before. A spell is kind of like what it sounds like. So you can create the spell, but you have to name it, and you have to be able to spell it to cast it. You can also create one high-level spell every 2 days in-game. Alrighty, I think that's about all I can think of for your requirements to become a sorcerer, as well as some of the special skills that you get once you've achieved the sorcerer class. Sorcerers are a really fun class if you really like to tell stories. It's definitely a class where if you don't necessarily love to daydream up stories, it might be a little bit more challenging. I think that Sorcerer is a class that if you really like to daydream, if you really like to think about where people are coming from and where characters are kind of going, it can be a really, really fun class to explore and do some kind of creative, interesting things. It was actually a little hard for me to get this video started because I wasn't exactly sure how to come at it, because I think sorcerers are a class that kind of stand alone in their individuality. Every sorcerer is different. You look at a ranger, you look at a druid, you look at an alchemist, you know, they're all individuals, but sorcerers are really based in the idea that they have something that drives them, some sort of really powerful emotion, and the weird mix of fate, but they also have magical powers. So each sorcerer is unique. So I think if you're a player that really is looking to be creative, not only in the spells that you cast and create, but the story that you tell, Sorcerer is a great class for you.